Okay, so in this video I'm going to show you how to wrap a helmet. I'm using a saw stand because it has a little extension that you can easily put the helmet on top with a little bit of padding from a towel. I'm just putting the chin strap together here so I can use a clamp to pull it down and make sure it's secure. So you have to have the helmet secure to be able to wrap it properly, and so that looks good. And now I'm just popping off the visor. Every visor is kind of different, so you want to make sure and be careful with that. And now I'm just wiping the helmet down. It's a brand new helmet, but due to handling and things like that, you may have some oils from your skin that could get on the helmet, and that could inhibit the adhesion. You also want to wipe off your hands really well. And throughout the wrap, I may be wiping off my hands multiple times. So that was me showing the primer 94. I like to put a little bit around all the edges. It helps hold down the wrap. We're using Avery. There's also another product called Pro Bond. Both of these are adhesive promoters and they work pretty well. You could wrap it without the adhesive promoter. So here I am opening up the tube, which has the wrap in it. So you can see it's a very thick tube, very well protected. And then all the pieces, they're not pre-cut, but they're oversized. If you've watched any of our videos, that's how they all come. So you just roughly cut them out. You don't have to be precise. All that overlap you're going to trim away. And so there's two sides and a top to the helmet, and that top is the rectangle piece. So there I am holding the right side, and I'm kind of looking at a reference point of where I want to put the butterfly that's on the left. So I think here, yeah, I'm getting ready to wipe down the handrail where I'm going to stick the masking tape to. So I like to rip off masking tape and put a few pieces there so they're handy. And now I'm also showing a preview of the actual helmet design. So if you're a customer, you're going to get that. And of course, I have access to it. And so what I'm doing is I'm just picking out a few reference points, the twig of the flowers and also the butterfly, making sure it's roughly in the correct place. And now I want to tape this off on both sides. So left and right, and then also one to kind of help hold the position up and down. So once you have it taped off, you can remove one side. It doesn't matter which one you go with. You could start with the back or front. Peel away that backing and just cut that away. Make sure you don't cut the wrap. And so then we're going to heat it up. You want to try to hold the material from the top. That way, as the material gets more flexible and wavy, it doesn't fold in on itself. And then you want to just stretch that over there. You don't have to do a lot of stretch at this point, just a tiny amount. And the main thing is I'm paying attention where that butterfly is. I want it to make sure and have that located in the proper place. So once you have it tacked up a little bit, go ahead and stretch it out. You want to mainly do these wraps where you're tacking it up in the middle first and stretch it out a little bit. That's going to make it easier for you to stretch out the top and the bottom and get those wrinkles out if you stretched it a little bit as you went around the radius. So now I'm doing the same thing in the front, kind of making sure the middle part is tacked down, not worrying so much about the bottom and the top yet. So now I'm going back and stretching out the top. And so roughly what I'm doing is I'm kind of stretching over the top, kind of getting it out of the way. And then the bottom, I'm stretching it down all the way to the edge of where it's going to go. So I'm not really detailing out all the creases. I'm just making sure that the major portions go down and that there's no air bubbles trapped in there. And the reason you want to do that is because if you have an air bubble underneath there in the middle and then you firmly press down around the edges, it's going to be a little bit harder to get up. So you kind of want to tack it up in the middle and make sure all the middle air bubbles are out. And so now I'm kind of detailing around this black area. This helmet actually has some comms and also a camera on it. So there's some controls on the right and left, and so that kind of protrudes out a little bit there. So I'm just getting up tight to the edge of that comm section, which is like a black plastic piece that kind of rises above the surface of the helmet. Here's kind of a closer view. You can see it in the below the butterfly there, how the light's reflecting on it. It's sort of a octagon shape, I guess. So I'm just kind of heating it up and gradually working in with my fingers, and then also with my squeegee. And then I just have the top part of a sock in there, but they also sell felt sleeves that go over these. So Fellers sells these, and you can probably buy them on Amazon too. Squeegee is basically just a silicone squeegee, and then the sock kind of helps it not be abrasive as you go into tight corners and push hard. And the felt ones work kind of the same way. They help it glide over, but felt has kind of like lint that can separate off in some areas, and sometimes it's bad. So here I'm looking at a very detailed area with the flashlight in hand. It's a little dark in my garage because I only have a couple overhead lights and I'm on the opposite side of the light, so I'm kind of having to use that hand light to see where I'm at. So this video is sped up 4 times, and I kind of roughly edited it out. So there's a little bit of a pause there. So now I'm just going back, and I'm close enough to start cutting around the edge and detailing out this piece. Now you want to make sure and have a sharp X-Acto knife. I've got one that has the replaceable blades, and so the sharper it is, the easier it is to kind of get a clean cut. That's pretty important. You want it to be pretty close there. I'm tucking in the edges around the black plastic area, just making sure everything's going in there pretty closely. And so now I'm going on to the top part. So all I did was I just kind of lifted up the material so it's lifted until I get to the edge of those wrinkles. And now I'm showing the knifeless finishing tape by 3M. It's kind of like a thin piece of adhesive tape that has almost like a piece of dental floss in the middle. There's videos that show how to use this online. Basically you just lay down where you want. You have to plan ahead, and so you want to lay that down where you plan on cutting the vinyl. So you use the finishing tape, or specifically the floss that's in the middle of the tape. As you pull it up, it'll cut the vinyl. And so the reason we're using the finishing tape here is you don't want to wrap it up against the helmet and then use an X-Acto knife. That would put cuts or scratches on the surface of the helmet, and of course that's not good. If you had an older bike and you didn't have finishing tape and you didn't care about the surface underneath, or if you had a really ragged out helmet, you know, definitely you could cut into it, and if you had cut marks on a helmet it probably wouldn't matter. But this is like a pretty high-end helmet, so I want to make sure not cut into the finish of it. And so this is kind of a bad angle, but you can kind of see what I'm doing. I'm basically just heating it up, backing up off of those wrinkles, and then heating it up and stretching it out. And I'm wanting to get past the finishing tape. So if I get it smooth past the finishing tape, then that's really all the distance that I need to get, and then I'm able to use the finishing tape to cut away the excess. So you can see the indentation there where the finishing tape is, and from the front of the helmet almost all the way to the back I've got it flattened out like it needs to be. A little bit at the bottom, and so see how I'm pulling in 2 directions as I pull down. That kind of helps get rid of those wrinkles. So now I'm just smoothing everything out. It helps to kind of really press down the material where the finishing tape is. That way the material doesn't pull up too much as you cut through it. So you can see I'm pulling up the finishing tape line now, the dental floss part, and so that actually pulls away from the green tape part. So after you pull out the dental floss, you have to pull away the green tape, and of course just peeling away the excess there. Now you see I stick that up in the background. That's in case you have an accident where you need to patch a certain area. So it's good to kind of leave some excess sometimes. So now I'm just smoothing everything down. You want to make sure the edges are up against the helmet, pressed in pretty hard at the top, because when you pull that finishing tape out, it kind of breaks the seal there. So you want to repress that in. And if you don't repress it in, if you stretched it at a certain point and you didn't tack it up and press it in again, you may come back and look at it a few minutes later and it may start retracting from where that line is. So right after you pull up the finishing tape, you want to smooth it out. So now I'm just going in and pressing in some more details, getting it close around the face opening of the helmet up against the black rubber seal. So the reason you want to go in pretty tight against it is it makes it easier to cut. You can kind of tell where you need to cut at. So if you have a deep groove, it kind of helps guide the blade, and it makes it easier to tell where you need to cut. So I do recommend an X-Acto knife too, because the shape of an X-Acto knife, that trailing edge, kind of helps you be able to keep the blade cut line straight. You can see that worked out pretty well there. Now this helmet, it has the rubber edge around it, so you want to keep that in mind when you're cutting. You want to make sure your blade is angled towards that. So one technique you can do is, depending on what you're cutting through and what you're trying to make sure and keep the edge off of, you can kind of rotate the blade, and it kind of helps it so the cut line is, the facing edge isn't touching the rubber as you glide across it. So now I'm detailing out this little mouth vent, the chin vent. There we go. And then it was kind of hard to tell there, but I used my thumbnail to kind of roll in the edge underneath. And I'm using my thumbnail there too to kind of find the edge and tuck it in really good. And so almost about to finish up here with the front. There we go. And going around to the back. Okay, everything is almost done. So now there's cutting out that little section there for the rear vent. It's pretty straightforward. I used the thumbnail technique to tuck that in again. Obviously the squeegee, being shaped like a credit card, it's not small enough to tuck in there really like you need to. And so sometimes you can, this is the hinge area of the helmet. Sometimes, if you have a black helmet and you have a lot of black in the design, you could wind up cutting away that whole recess area. But this helmet, since it has a pink background, what I'm doing is I'm trying to cut in exactly to the black plastic area of the recess area of where the hinge is, because when the visor's down, you can see the lower right area to the exact hinge where that one closed cherry blossom bulb is. You can see that graphic is shown through a clear visor, so it would look odd to just be white there. So I tried to wrap up in as close to that as I could. And so now I'm just making sure it's pressed in corners really good. You want to get all that as good as you can before you move to the next area. And so now that I have a cut line, and I could have done this step first before applying the first one, what I did was I wrapped up to about the area and then laid down the cut line. But for this other side, since I know where my line is on the right hand side of the helmet, I wanted the finishing tape to be exact, be placed in the exact area so it's symmetrical. So I went ahead and put the finishing tape. Here I am pulling up the reference points again, just making sure that that butterfly is in that same location. And so most of these wraps, including ones for motorcycles, there will be like a reference point that you kind of want to look at and make sure you get it right. So not only up and down, sometimes you have to worry about twisting, and that can really throw a wrap off. Not really a helmet so much, because there's only two sides and then a middle piece, and normally I don't put a lot of graphics in the middle when I set these up, so that's why it's kind of a solid color. There's a little bit of fade in the back, but it's harder to kind of line everything up if you have graphics that overlap and go onto the top. And I have done ones that have some graphics in the back, but it helps if you have kind of a forgiving design. So a lot of the bike skins designs have kind of a grunge look to them with patterns and noise and things like that, and it really, that's kind of a design choice because it makes it easier to install. If it was clean straight lines in designs and things like that, then if anything was installed wrong, it would really stick out. Okay, so I did like a preliminary lay down there, and my finishing tape kind of came up with the wrap, so I corrected that, making sure everything is kind of pressed in there. So moving the camera around to kind of get a better view on that. So it's the same step as the other side. I think this angle may be a little bit better, so you can see now that I have the rear tacked up, I'm ready to tack up the front. So we're just mainly worried about getting a little bit of stretch there and mainly tacking up the middle height wise. So not really trying to get wrinkles out on the top right now. I'm just kind of getting it out across the top of the chin guard and right above the opening of the helmet. So now what I'm doing is I'm stretching out the bottom, making sure that lays flat. Just putting a little bit of heat on it, and it's not a ton of heat. I think this is like a Harbor Freight heat gun, and I think it's on maybe like a mid-level setting. And so this is sped up. You can't see how long I'm holding it there, but it's not that long. The material gets a little bit stretchy and deforms pretty quickly. So, and you'll be able to tell as you start heating it up, it's not that hard. You also saw a small wrinkle that was in the top center there. I kind of pushed out with my fingers. Sometimes you have to back up and reapply, but when you do this a while, you can kind of tell which wrinkles you'll be able to press out just if you kind of push in or heat up a little bit with your fingers. So that was just kind of a small one I could press out. So now I'm again going over the detail areas around the controls on the left hand side, and then I'm also going around the detailed areas of the hinge area, putting a little light on it so you can see the indentions and crevices as I press it in. So this light, it's not just for this video, it's helpful to have a light. The lights kind of help show the imperfections and crevices and ridges a little bit better, especially from this angle. You can kind of see. So whatever you're working on, you want to be able to see the glossiness and reflections and indentions really well, because you're using that to kind of tell what to move to next. So now what I'm doing is just removing that knifeless finishing tape. I kind of cut a little bit before the tape, and that kind of helps it get started a little bit better. Otherwise, if there's a little bit of material there where you're starting to cut through, the knifeless finishing tape kind of can't really cut through it good if it doubles up. So it's kind of good to start it a little bit with just a little cut. So here I'm just detailing around the chin vent again. And another thing too is this is currently the 1st of November, so it's not really that hot or cold. But it's kind of important to point this out because, you know, I've got the garage door open. This isn't something you would want to do in a room where it's really hot. So, you know, if your hands sweat at all and you're handling the material, then those oils from your hands will get on the adhesive backing, and it'll really inhibit how well the material sticks. So I've done it before, maybe 15 years ago, where you have areas that are failing and you can't get it to stick like it should, and sometimes it's just from your hands being a little bit oily and touching it, and also from other customers or other installers that I'll see problems. So this is me kind of working on this recess area here. I'm kind of poking some air bubbles with the tip of the knife, and sometimes that'll help the material lay down if it can kind of let the air bubbles release that gas as you press it in. And then also once you get it all the way in, it's kind of good to do like a post heat. So Avery and 3M, they have detailed instructions on post heating, how many degrees it should go to. What I notice is that if it goes to a heat level that is hot enough that you can press like let's say that top of the sock wrap piece, if you kind of press that in there, you can kind of see the indentions of the threads, then you got a good post heat. I forget what the exact heat rating is though. But of course you don't have to post heat everything. Just some recesses if you're having trouble with it or something like that. So here I'm detailing the hinge again. Do a little repositioning here. So now I'm getting ready to apply the middle piece. And so you really want to, before you put this primer 94 down, you want to wipe this off with alcohol, especially around the edges where it's going to overlap, because as you're wrapping it and smoothing it out, you know, I'm rubbing in my fingers against it so you can have more oils there. So I want to wipe that off, and then also I'm using the primer 94 in the areas around the top of the helmet, so that's where the black area is, and it's got a camera. And then I'm also applying primer 94 around the edge where the seam is going to be, where the overlapping seam is, because you really want that to kind of lay down and hold good too. So now this primer 94 dries pretty quick, so like I'm not really putting a lot on there, just barely any at all, hardly. And then once it dries, you know, 5 minutes later you can put the finishing tape on. So this finishing tape's where your cut line's going to be, so obviously I'm letting this be a little bit far away from the edge. It's kind of hard to tell here. We may get in another shot. It's around maybe a 1/4 inch, maybe slightly less than that from the edge. Because the main thing is if this heats up or if it stretches a little bit and pulls back like a 32nd of an inch, you don't want it to pull away and show a gap. So here you can see there about how much overlap that is. So it's not much, but just a small amount. So here I'm not really masking anything up. I just kind of removed half of it and started tacking it up. I'm trying to get this darker fade to be as close to the bottom as possible because I want as much of that dark fade to come up, because it looks like it kind of comes up higher on the helmet. So I could have, in the print, I could have gave myself just a little bit more fade, but I think it turns out close enough. So I'm mostly trying to and here's another thing too, like you know, as you're working on a helmet like this, you want to think about what areas are kind of tacking up first. So you know, I could have started from the middle, or I could have started from the bottom, or I could have started from the front. But of course that fade was kind of crucial to me, so that's why I started from that end first. I wanted to get as much, I wanted to use as much of that fade as possible. So starting from the back helped me get as close to that as I could. And so as you go around a helmet, you know, obviously there's compound radiuses, so it's bent forward and it's left to right. So that means you have a lot of excess material as you go around that radius. That's one of the reasons why I set these wraps to be 3 pieces, so 2 sides and a top. It would be pretty impossible to do a helmet in 1 piece. So I'm cutting a slit down the middle because that camera piece, the black center piece, is so high it's pulling away. It's not letting me have enough relief to kind of get to the edge like I need to, so I just set up a slit there, and I'm gonna just do a seam in the front. So most helmets you can do in 1 piece, and not 1 piece, but the center piece you can do in 1 piece without a relief cut. But because that camera is so high there, I had to do a relief cut to kind of help me get that there. So now I'm just detailing the front kind of little vent area, and I'm just setting up where the center is. And I'm removing the finishing tape on the right hand side of the helmet. Again, I apologize for the bad camera angle here. So now I'm just kind of making sure everything looks okay on the right hand side, peeling away the rest of the finishing tape. So as you cut it, sometimes the left and right hand side of the green finishing tape, one of the sides will be kind of tucked under the edge. I was removing that. I'm getting a little bit closer to this vent so I can kind of cut it out in the future. And I think I'm almost, oh okay, I'm setting up a finishing tape for the middle, so there's an overlapping seam there. And so now I think I'm ready to wrap the left hand side, applying a little bit of heat and just pulling it on over. I think here what I'm doing is I'm kind of detailing the back, making sure that's tucked in good like it needs. And now I'm ready to kind of finish up the front. So sometimes I'm heating the material from underneath, sometimes I'm heating it from the top. It really doesn't matter. Pressing all that in there. making sure I'm overlapping the green finishing tape. And so there's that pre-cut, and then remove the finishing tape. Now I'm getting the underside finishing tape. You can see there's a little bit left back there where it was blurry. So now I'm coming back and pressing it down where that finishing tape seam was. Okay, so now it's finished out. Just kind of showing all the different angles and also a good angle with the visor on.